That's right, everybody. Thank you, as always, for joining me on this journey inside the Black Vault. I want to apologize yesterday, and I will say this on Friday, to all of those evil spirits out there. Technical problems, be gone. That was not only embarrassing yesterday, but it was frustrating. I want to apologize to Kevin Randall. For those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, long story short, it was pretty frustrating. We got Kevin in. Everything was fine. About 20 minutes later, his audio cut. I know you guys could hear me. His audio cut. We spent about 10 minutes trying to get it back. And since he was a little bit short on time, myself as well, sadly, we just couldn't get it back up and running, so we had to postpone. Now, with that said, I've already talked to Kevin, and we're setting up probably next Thursday. I haven't advertised that yet. Probably next Thursday. But man, that was just frustrating. I am an OCD perfectionist, and I honestly want everything to go flawless with stuff like this. You guys should see the setup I have here. I've got 4 monitors in front of me. I just installed a second camera. In fact, I did a test yesterday for those of you who caught that, and I deleted the video, but we hung out for 10 minutes or so while we were testing things, and I just wanted it to go good. And sure enough, 20 whatever minutes in, crash and burn. It was the biggest fail of not only 2020, but this channel as a whole. But that's okay. We're going to be back with Kevin next week. I appreciate that. Corno 2483, John, not your fault. These things happen. Yes, they do. Sadly, I just don't like them happening. That's the problem. But that said, I didn't really advertise this stream that much. Don't worry, though. There's going to be a lot of information in it. Just don't know how big the live crowd is going to be. If you're listening to the recorded version, just know there is a YouTube channel, and I stream most of my interviews and shows live. And you can easily get there. It's www.theblackvault.com/live, and that will take you to the YouTube channel where you can subscribe. So yes, Renee, I am a flawless perfectionist, but I got flaws. So that flawless part isn't quite accurate, but I appreciate that. What I want to ask those that are watching live, let me know how the audio and video looks and sounds. Why? I just installed the camera, like I said, and I'm broadcasting in a different resolution, so it should look a little bit clearer to you, but I'm worried about the audio sync. So nobody's really screaming about it yet, so I'm thinking probably it's going to be okay. So let's get going here. I don't want to go on too long. I do and will open up the toll-free call-in lines. So if you're interested in calling, it is toll-free. Call in, and we can have a chat. You can ask me anything on what I am about to talk about, and I'll try and go through that as quick as I can. I know I can be long-winded sometimes, but you can also ask whatever you want. And so if it doesn't pertain to what I went over, but you want to ask me something else, that sounds good. Sorry for my phone there. And so not a problem. There's also going to be a texting line. I will go ahead and put those numbers on the screen. If you're a little bit shy, you don't want to call in, that's okay too. Feel free to go ahead and text in your questions, and I will get to those as well. I'll pull them up. That's the reason why I still have my phone on. I didn't know the volume was. I'm going to pull up that text message. So when those texts come in, it comes to my iPhone. So you guys have that direct line to me. Feel free to do so when those numbers go up. So as I usually do, you know I love presentations and love being a little bit visual for you guys. So what I want to go ahead and do is start with that right now. Let me go ahead and switch camera views for you. I'm going to talk about a couple of different things here. And obviously it surrounds a little bit about the Pentagon and the UFO statements. This last week, everything got thrown well back into the spotlight. And so what happened here in the last week, I've got a couple monitors like I just mentioned. So if you see me going all around here, I apologize. I'm just trying to get the chat room up as well. I'm going to look for questions in there, but it's going to be very hard. So those numbers are now on the screen. So in the last week, as this topic has been kind of thrown back into the spotlight, and rightfully so for a couple of different reasons, I realized that it's been a little while since I've done one of these and kind of gone over some stories that you may or may not have missed. If you didn't miss them, great. This might be a little bit of a review, but also an opportunity for me to expand a little bit on some of the information that has come out. And I'll also get into the Luis Elizondo interview that I did, a couple other topics. And then it's all you. This show will depend on you towards the end to call, text, and we'll go from there. I did get quite a few submissions already. I've got some that I put into the slide, into the PowerPoint slide projection here that you see on your screen. I got some emails, so I've got them here in my hand. And then, of course, we'll deal with the live ones as well. So the biggest news, I would say, that if you did or did not miss this, this is something that I think is incredibly overlooked. And let me first say something very important. And that is, when I get a Pentagon statement, this does not mean that I believe it, right? This does not mean that and I'm switching screens again here. Sorry about this. It doesn't mean that I believe it. It doesn't mean that I put all of my weight behind it. It doesn't mean that I think it is gospel. But I do think it's all part of the story. And I often get criticized for, quote unquote, believing the Pentagon, when in fact I don't. There is a difference between either reporting on or conveying the message versus actually saying this is the God's honest truth. And that is very much true with the Pentagon. But it is part of the story, whether some people like it or not. And so I wanted to kind of preface that because I don't want it to seem like I'm saying, well, this is it. The Pentagon said it. And here's a prime example on why. And they did a complete change of their story, a complete change of their stance on AATIP. Now, just kind of a refresher here. On May 22nd, 2019, the New York Post ran a story about AATIP. This was done by Stephen Greenstreet, investigative journalist over there. He has an online show as well that he does through the New York Post called The Basement, I believe. Definitely check that out. And he had run a story which was about AATIP, and he got a statement. And the Pentagon said that AATIP did pursue research and investigation into unidentified aerial phenomena. Now, I'll tell you now what I told the New York Post then, and it was like the Pentagon tried very hard not to say that. And that's why I had my reservations of believing that it was a UFO program. I fully admit that. And when this was published, I was wrong. I mean, look, they said it. I had an idea, a theory for a while based on the evidence at hand. And, you eat crow a little bit, but hey, you can only deal with the evidence that you have and you move forward. And so when the New York Post came to me for comment. So I was published in their article when this news broke. And then they had me on their television series. And I said, yeah, I was shocked. Never used that S word, but I was genuinely shocked that the Pentagon had said this. And yet fast forward to what happened next. And I was pursuing a story through what I do with the Black Vault. And I was asking a couple different questions, well, quite a few, actually, I won't lie, but one in particular that had nothing to do with pushing the issue of whether or not they dealt with UAPs. Why? Well, because they already dealt with that. They already answered it, and there were already statements out there in the universe. And so when you deal with the Pentagon spokesperson, you generally don't continue to challenge. You can push back, absolutely, and I do and have. But once they kind of put that official statement out there, that is to them essentially gospel. That is what they believe, and that is their stance. They do change things, as you're about to find out, not only on UFOs, but quite a few other things. But generally, they put a lot of research into it, and they put a lot of weight behind it. So they did this change with me and gave me a new statement and took back what they told the New York Post. And they said neither AATIP nor OSAP were UAP related. The purpose of AATIP was to investigate foreign advanced aerospace weapon systems applications with future technology projections over the next 40 years, and to create a center of expertise on advanced aerospace technologies. The goal was to help understand the threat posed by unconventional or leap-ahead aerospace vehicles / technologies that could have national security implications for the U.S. The OSAP contract goal was to study 12 technical areas, which included lift, propulsion control, armament signatures reduction, materials configuration, power generation, temporal translation, human effects, human interface, and technology integration. I hate reading things to you. I'm not trying to be a professor and run a class here, but it's important because this is going to come up a couple different times here. This was what the Pentagon stated. Now, why was I shocked? Well, the evidence that we had at hand back in January of last year, the Defense Intelligence Agency, the agency which headed up the OSAP contract, had released the titles of the 38 reports. They call them the DIRD, Defense Intelligence Reference Documents, I believe it is. And none of them had anything really to do with UFOs. But when you listen to this, that is exactly what those dealt with few exceptions. One on the Drake equation, which, didn't really make sense. So does that pave the way for it being a UFO program? Maybe. So all of that being said, now they've changed it. And I was more confused at this moment than I was when they said, yeah, you know what? It did deal with UAPs. Now, a lot of people said that was a change of statement. I have challenged those that have attacked since then to produce a Pentagon statement that said and denied UAP involvement prior to the New York Post. Not a single person can give me a statement, meaning this is the only time that I know of so far that they've changed the statement. Many people are talking about how they've done this now 3 times. All of that is untrue, but obviously they are changing it now. This is incredibly important. It really is. It didn't get a whole lot of attention, not like when the Navy admitted that those 3 videos were UAPs. However, this is something that's incredibly important because the Pentagon's they're backtracking. Are they lying? Quite possibly. I mean, I'm not going to rule that out. But you have to admit at least this somewhat makes sense on why those DIRD reports were about exactly what she is explaining here. Ironically, this is how Mr. Luis Elizondo also describes AATIP, where he talks about lift, propulsion control, and so on. So it's like they very much align 75% of the way. And then the Pentagon takes an extreme right turn, and Mr. Elizondo takes an extreme left turn on exactly what the core of the project was all about. So what all that means, I'm not really sure, to be honest with you, but it is something that is important, and it's something that can't be overlooked. No other statements have been changed. I did verify that with the Pentagon. I had broken that story that had not been out before. It was picked up by a few media outlets. But again, it's not as sexy as the government saying, yep, this is UAP, or yep, we investigated UAPs. It's not sexy when they take it back. But in my view, it absolutely is, and it's part of the story, because the minute you document them changing their story, let's see what happens if they change it again. And you have to create this timeline of these blunders, so to speak, and it's important. When they issue a statement, this is a lesson. It should not be final. It's one that, again, I'm very much mischaracterized as believing it's final, and it really isn't, but it's part of the story, and then you need evidence to go along with it to either prove or disprove it, and that's kind of what I do through the Freedom of Information Act. One other misconception is I only use the Freedom of Information Act, not only believe what's obtained through FOIA. That is absolutely not true, and a misconception that's out there. So don't believe it. If it's on Twitter, it doesn't mean it's true. Here's another one I want to talk about. I published this, let me see, what's today? Friday, early this week. And yes, with a 1-year-old and a 5-year-old, I really do lose track of time. So I don't think I've slept in 5 years. So sorry about that. But yeah, it was earlier this week from the recording of this, where I published a surprise interview with Mr. Luis Elizondo himself. Now, for those watchers of this YouTube channel, listeners of this podcast, if you listen to the recorded version, or if you just follow me on social media, you will know that I've been highly critical of the story that comes from this man. And that's something that is not meant to be disrespectful, though is often construed that way. It is not meant to insult him, though that is often what is misconstrued. But rather, it's to try and verify something that has a lot of problems. I call them red flags. A lot of facts don't match up. Not because I think it is true or not true, or I believe this. Take me out of the equation. When you look at multiple interviews, not only by Mr. Elizondo, but you add in Senator Harry Reid, then you add in Dr. Hal Puthoff, there are many contradictions that create a really cruddy narrative about what AATIP was all about. Some people accuse me of nitpicking. Well, this is what we need to do when we're talking about big claims of people that come out of the government and say X, Y, and Z. So I published that interview. It got a lot of positive praise from a lot of people that generally will attack me for what I'll bring forward. Were very complimentary. And so as much as I love the praise from everyone, that actually meant the most to me, simply because they do look for those things to attack me on. And with this, it was quite the opposite. Of course, there were still a few, well, you can't please everyone. But for the most part, it's very, very positive. So I would highly recommend people to read it. I'm only going to go through two quick things that he said. And thank you for that. I see that in the chat room. Great interview with Luis Elizondo. John, thank you for that. It was my opportunity to allow him to clear the air. And when I had reached out to him, nobody was the middleman here. I had reached directly out to him, as I have quite a few times in the past year and a half or so. Oftentimes I was ignored. Other times when we did chat before the Pentagon statements really got harsh, we did share some emails, but nothing was on the record, nor did he want to go on the record, and so on. So he wouldn't talk to me on the record. And then I was ignored quite a bit. So when I would publish articles, all of that was accurate. He would not return the message for comment. But this time was a little bit different. What I wanted to do was reach out to him, and I said, look, it's 2020. You guys came out 2017. People want to know answers. There's a lot of stuff going on out there. And so what I said, look, let me ask some questions about the Pentagon statements, and I will publish 100% of what you give me. I won't edit it. I won't truncate it. I won't try and fight it. I won't nothing. I will say what the Pentagon says and do a write-up about your side of this, because it does mean a lot to me to have that as part of the story. I've said it 1,000 times. It's not fair to talk about somebody without their side. And even though I had tried, sadly, it just, never came to fruition until about 2 weeks ago. And so we went back and forth quite a bit. I did, this was because I wanted it this way, so there was no misunderstanding. Had wanted all of what he said in writing. That way I could publish 100% of what he said. And that's exactly what I did. Everything that you see there is 100%. I didn't truncate it at all. I did not take anything out. So there's two big things that I want to go over, because I have talked about him so much on this show. I want to make sure on this channel that I do kind of give his view on what, again, I have been very critical about. Going along the lines of what the Pentagon just said and how that they changed everything, AATIP, it was not about advanced aircraft. It was indeed about UFOs, UAPs. There is additional information that clearly indicates AATIP's focus being UAP. I don't think that info has been made public yet, but I am certain it is forthcoming. There is documentation that provides no doubt as to what our focus was. I don't know what he is talking about when it comes to additional stuff coming out. However, the next statement will kind of explain that a little bit, and he would not go farther than this. I did want him to elaborate, but obviously, for whatever reason it may be, and I respected it, he did not want to go farther than this. So he's saying things are in the works, but here's what he said when I asked him about how he felt. Again, not give me documents to disprove it. I wanted to know how he felt, because I think that that's a big thing that admittedly even myself misses when you start critiquing somebody's story and then all of a sudden the Pentagon takes a shot. Like, who cares what John Greenewald says? But when the Pentagon, your former employer, really does kind of a harsh attack in the form of statements, I wanted to know how that made him feel. That is an important aspect to the story that, again, admittedly, even I miss, that we're talking about a human being here. And, can we just label him a liar? Well, I've never called him a liar. Just questioned it. But I wanted to get into how this all made him feel. And this is from Mr. Elizondo. Emotionally, it was very disappointing, but not surprising. There are elements in the Pentagon that are seriously upset with me for breaking rank in their eyes. However, efforts are underway to isolate and expose these individuals and hold them accountable. I'm very optimistic that 2020, this will be resolved. I can go into great detail on our I can't go into great detail on our strategy only because it has not been finalized yet. I think it's a vendetta by a few in the Pentagon, but I think we will all know the real reason this year. Now, here's what I'm going to say about this. I don't know what to believe. I don't. But I am so appreciative for him opening up to me and at least giving me his side a little bit. There's still a lot of unanswered questions. I focused in on the Pentagon statements. I am hoping that this is the first interview. And to heat off any of the questions you may have, yes, I am working, and hopefully we'll have more of this in the most fair way that I can. But obviously he's saying here on the record, there is a vendetta. He's saying on the record that things are underway to figure out what's going on and make it better, make it right. There is a point. Let's just play the bad guy for a second and just think, oh, well, he's lying. He's lying. There is a point when you're lying about something that you don't just start putting things in writing and want to be published about talking about the Pentagon and telling everyone that they will change it because things are underway. You got to have some major guts to start trying to pull that off if you really are just kind of spinning this fairy tale out to the public. And for me, I respect that. Do I believe it? I don't know yet. I mean, I'll wait and I'll hold off. It's frustrating for a lot of people that we have to wait a little bit longer. But I respect the fact that he's going on the record saying, you know what, they're wrong. And I'm staying by it. And he went to, again, arguably one of his biggest critics out there, myself, to share this information and to share it all with you guys. So I respect it. And I think I speak for myself here. I found a newfound respect for his side of the story now that I got to hear a little bit of it. However, I want to stress, and he knows this about me, that there's still a lot more. There's like 95% more. I made a joke in one of our conversations that I had to table 86,501 questions because I had to hone in on exactly what I pitched him about. And so that's what I ultimately did. So I would recommend, that's just 2 quotes. I would highly recommend that you guys download this, go to theblackvault.com, go into the document archive, and the subject is The Fringe. I'll put it in the show notes once this goes into podcast form. If you're listening on the recorded version, it's theblackvault.com, theblackvault.com/show notes. That will get you to the show notes page. I'll direct link it, but for those of you who are watching live, that is how you get to it. And I do recommend it because he goes into great detail about disclosure, goes into detail about the future of ufology, and talks a little bit more about the Pentagon and his side. And so I'm proud of the article as a whole, but equally proud that I was able to finally bring at least part of the story out. Long way to go, but at least part of it is there. Here's one question that came in from a Patreon supporter, nickname Wannabe Sleuth. I don't know if you are in the room. If you are, thank you for your support. If you guys like this channel, like these presentations, like the interviews that I do, it is a huge help, even at $1 a month, to join in on the Patreon channel. So if you can support, awesome. There's a super chat on the YouTube chat. If you're watching live, the super chat all kind of goes into support, 100% support the Black Vault, goes right back in. So I appreciate all of those Patreon supporters. Here's one question that got submitted for today. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is, while I'm doing this, the phone line is open. The way that it works, if you don't know, is if I'm ready for you, I'll just bring you right on. If I don't, what I'll go ahead and do is put you on hold. I had the network changed. Well, I hope they changed the hold music, but I didn't get a chance to test it before today's live stream. So if it's really cruddy, kind of not so much fun music to listen to, I apologize in advance. I have been wanting that to change. It did change, and then it got defaulted back. So I have the network working on it. But regardless of all that, I'll put you on hold. It'll tell you what place you are in line, how many callers are ahead of you. It'll say if you want to leave a message, don't do that because, well, you won't be brought on the air. So don't try and leave a message. Just go ahead and sit tight and I'll bring you on. So feel free to give a call or you can go ahead and text, which I'll bring that up. So let me go ahead and read the question. What do you think of all the drones, big drones, I may add, that have been flying over western Kansas and all over Colorado. They are only saying northeast Colorado, but my spouse saw a drone in West Denver. And you know what? Give me 1 second here. See, this is the fun of live. I can't see where you're at. Okay, guys, sorry. A little bit of operator error on that. Bear with me here. I lost my presentation, so that's why I'm just bringing it back for you. Okay, they're only saying northeast Colorado, but my spouse saw a drone in West Denver. I'm just curious if you've seen this or have been following this craziness. The government says it has nothing to do with this, but I don't buy that because there is a base right by where the drones seem to be reporting or to be flying over. So again, thank you for submitting that question. Here's my thing with the Colorado drones, right? It's obviously a big story making big headlines, and this is my critique and problem with the mainstream media is obviously they're glomming onto this. I've looked into it. There's actually quite a few law enforcement officials that have spoken out and offices. If you read like the bottom paragraph of many of these media reports, that they're investigating a lot of these reports of drones and so on and so forth. However, nothing is like really being captured on camera. Nothing is coming up. And why I bring that up is I think what we're seeing what we're seeing right now with a lot of what's going on is hype. I'll put this picture on screen. This is a prime example of kind of the hype. I saw this picture. I was like, wow, this is actually really cool. This was the headline of one of the Colorado newspapers that was talking about it. No caption. So you just kind of operate off the assumption that's what this is all about. And so I read through the article, same deal. Law enforcement officers are kind of scratching their heads. Like they go out, they investigate. Almost 100% of what they have been able to see or find was just a commercial drone like that your neighbor would have. And they weren't really kind of seeing this hype. And so at the very bottom of the article, there's a caption, there's a credit, and these are windmills. And so they falsely represented these windmills as these like a fleet of drones. Like that's the headline that we keep hearing about. And I thought that this was potentially one of those, pictures of the fleets. I'm like, wow, this is really incredible. And my gut originally was I was waiting for the marketing campaign of some movie or something to that effect to kind of fess up and say it was all a hoax and orchestrated by like a marketing arm for a new Hollywood blockbuster. But I think sadly what we're seeing with this is not to be skeptical or sound like a debunker, but I think we're just kind of seeing a little bit of media hype because I'm not seeing the videos, the photographs. In fact, I looked at quite a few articles. I didn't see any. This was the first one that I had found and got all excited. And then luckily I saw the caption, or I'd feel like an idiot when somebody said, dude, you just showed a bunch of windmills on the screen saying that was the fleet of drones. But that's what the media is doing. This was the headline version. So not to sound like a debunker, that's what I think is going on in Colorado and the surrounding areas. But I will say this, if you did not see the headline, this was a story that I wrote last month as well, of a FAA database. Now, obviously the FAA is concerned about drones, especially this day and age. There's about 1.8 million drones that are registered, the last I heard, with the FAA. Now, those that are registered are the commercial, the big ones, the ones doing television photography, still photography, stuff like that. 1.8 million. And obviously you've got a lot more that people don't register, or they're just the toys and they don't go super high. So this is becoming a huge problem. So I started sniffing around the database for the FAA where they keep track of these drone sightings. And sure enough, entwined in this is a bunch of UFO reports. And so, in fact, there was hundreds of unidentified aerial objects, unidentified flying objects, UFO references. Here's one where, reported a UFO 150 nautical miles north of, I forget what airport that is. Forgive me. and I'm sure some of you probably know that off the top of your head. It's right outside of Washington, D.C. But anyway, it gives the flight numbers, UFO reports. Here's another one, red and blue flashing lights, which obviously sounds like FAA-regulated craft, so probably nothing nefarious. But we're talking about the descriptions that you would commonly see with UFOs. Like here's a saucer-shaped UAS is another name for drone, or unmanned aircraft system is the technical acronym for it. And so you're talking about saucer shape. There's not a whole lot. There are, but there's not a whole lot of saucer shaped drones. So now you start getting into a whole new batch of reports that may be a little bit interesting. Are they all drones? Yeah, quite possibly. But it seems like this FAA database is chock full of these unidentified object reports that they're lumping in as, oh, well, it's drones, it's drones, it's drones, which goes back to some of the documents I found with the Air Force where they reference UFOs or UAPs as drones. Seems like that's like the swamp gas of today, where they just reference anything that's unidentified. Well, it's a drone. Well, not really. And hidden in this FAA database are literally hundreds of UFO type reports that do have characteristics that are unlike most drones that are out there. So before I go on, there is a call. I don't want to keep you on hold too long. So let me bring you on, and if I can have you turn your radio down in the back. Who's this? You're live on the air.
Yes.
Hello?
Hello? Yes.
Hi, who's this?
This is Cal Corf.
Hello, Cal Corf. How are you?
Hi, John. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing okay. I'm going to try and turn your volume up, but you're a little bit low.
Okay, hold on a second. Let me do it on my end. Okay.
All right. What's up? What can I do for you?
Well, first of all, I wanted to say thank you on behalf of UFO researchers for the fine work that you do. And as you know, I'm not the kind of person who believes in blowing sunshine. And I just wanted to commend you for securing the interview with Lou Elizondo, and just thank you for the work that you do. Also, if you have a moment, just want to ask you a couple of questions based on your many years of experience in pursuing this.
Of course, yeah. Sure. I appreciate the kind words, by the way. I'm trying to get a little bit more volume on you. I think everybody can hear you. I can hear you, but I know it broadcasts out a little. So if you speak up a little bit, I won't think you're yelling at me, Cal. But what are your questions?
Okay, is this better?
That is perfect, actually.
Okay, I'm sorry. That was a pilot error on my part. No pun intended. I had you on hands-free. I didn't realize that. Okay, real quickly. You and I have known of each other's work for quite a while. In my case, for example, I grew up with Bill Moore and Stanton Friedman and believed everything that adults would tell me when I was a young kid. And then I discovered very early on, especially in the UFO and paranormal fields, that adults do lie for various reasons. But what I wanted to ask you is this, because when I first started following your work in Prague, this was after 9/11. Mm-hmm. I had essentially walked away from the UFO field after my book, The Roswell UFO Crash, What They Don't Want You to Know, had come out. It had exposed Colonel Corso and all that other stuff. And I met with Bill Moore after the book came out, and he officially endorsed the conclusion that it was Project Mogul. Okay, so fine. Now, what bothered me when I went overseas and started doing intelligence work and getting involved with other countries, I was in 27 of them on 4 continents. I've written thousands of articles about terrorism and things like that. What shocked me was this, John, and this is a key reason I'm asking you this question, because you're one of the few people in this field who has extensive FOIA experience and expertise. This is what bothered me. What bothered me was the lack of UFO files or even interest by intelligence communities outside the U.S. as a whole. When you look at the issue of this, imagine there's a piece of a UFO somewhere in the custody of the U.S. government. There would be a lot of scientists all over it, analyzing it over the years, even if it was captured decades ago. There was no trail that I was able to find, even with Mossad, the top agency on the planet, to pursue the UFO issue. And not only would Jewish scientists most likely be involved just because they're very prominent in science across the physical sciences, but this absence of evidence, my mind would flash back to what Friedman would tell me as a kid, seemed to be, in my mind, evidence of absence in this case. So I'm asking you, as somebody who has done more extensive FOIA work than anybody I know of over the last few years, have you noticed a Swiss cheese pattern that shows you a pattern consistent with aliens visiting us, and only one or two governments gets it and the rest are dumb, for example, and don't bother? Or could it be that it's really military disinfo or something more prosaic, and that might explain why it's kind of hot and cold? I hope my question makes sense. I didn't rehearse it ahead of time.
No, I understand it. And if I follow you correctly, yeah, it does make sense. I mean, and that is my more skeptical point of view, is why isn't there a little bit more evidence? Now, let me first deal with Mogul, and let me ask you just very quickly. You operate off the assumption that Mogul is the correct answer, right? And that's okay if the answer is yes. I'm just making sure, because I don't want to mischaracterize what your stance is.
Yeah, and real quickly, as I mentioned in my book, I had interviewed Professor Moore, and he told me point blank that he met Stanton Friedman at a hotel in Socorro, New Mexico. This is beyond dispute. And he met Barry Greenwood. They were, had put an ad in the paper to solicit witnesses to their book, Crash at Corona. And he met them and rolled out everything. And they refused to believe him, and then accused him of being part of the cover-up and walked away. And what a lot of people don't know is that Irving Newton, who handled the debris and is in, one of the debris photos, he met with Professor Moore and went over the Mogul debris that they still had all these years. And he said this is exactly what was in that office. And so I was personally present when Stanton Friedman made up, literally in front of me, the so-called debris switch explanation, because Bill Moore had just given me the uncropped photos of the Roswell debris. We had been in a newspaper article together. He was on his tour. And when I saw those photos, I could read the contents of the Ramey memo. I got witnesses to this. And I said, we can solve this. Look at this. And I took the photos to Stan, and he said, there must have been a debris switch. I said, no, Stan, it's not aliens metal. It's crinkled. It's foil, blah, blah, blah. So the genesis of that became a myth. And it's unfortunate, but that is why I have that opinion, because as one of the four original Roswell researchers, only Stanton Friedman died agreeing to disagree. But the others, they all say it was Mogul.
Yeah, well, sadly, I had Kevin Randall on yesterday, and we were just kind of getting into Roswell, and I had a technical blunder, sadly. So next week, I'm going to be bringing his side of the story. So I'm interested in all aspects of it. The brief time that I can't speak for Stanton. I wish that he could speak for himself right now, and kind of bring that side of the story. I know he did a lot of work with that, and I don't want to say he was right or wrong. I just have always had a respect for the amount of work that he did. And you're on my list of people that I want to bring on and get your history as well. I mean, I like to bring my audience kind of a wide array of history. So we'll have to bring you back to really dive into that. What I will say about Mogul is I tried to really seek out documents on Project Mogul itself. No connection to UFOs, aliens, crash saucers. There's a part of me that just at one point didn't care about that. I was just interested in the top secret classified project that was Mogul, because it sounded really cool with how we were spying on Soviet nuclear tests and so on and so forth. To my surprise, a lot of those documents have mysteriously gone away. Now, some people will counter that and say, well, it's, X amount of decades later and the government loses things and this and that. Yeah, that's partially true. But I have dug up classified records that are still classified from World War I. So you can only go so far to argue, well, they just lose things. So there's something about that era, that time frame, that doesn't match up, in my opinion, even with the present day explanation. It just doesn't. The documentation isn't there. But I will say, to close that, and then I'll kind of move to the second part of your question. But what I will say is I don't think we'll ever get an answer. At this point, everything has been destroyed. One thing I wrote in my book was about the GAO, which again, I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts about that part of that investigation. But very quickly, when they had tried to seek into Roswell records and try and figure out what happened, they made their own conclusion. But they prefaced their entire report with the fact that they themselves found the fact that tons of stuff was destroyed, an unknown number of documents and so on. So that's what makes this very, very challenging on so many different levels, because you have your opinion, I have my opinion, Stan had his before he passed away, Kevin's going to have his version. And that's the thing, like not everyone agrees. And I don't know. I'm here to tell everyone who's listening, watching, listening on the podcast, whatever. I have no idea what happened. It could have been a top secret project. We're spying on the Soviets. All I'm saying from an investigative standpoint, from where I sit, and just my 2 cents, is that there's not enough evidence to support either side. And yes, the passage of time will allow us to kind of use that as an excuse a little bit. Well, they lost the documents and it's been a long time. But I can also, again, make that argument that there are things that have survived, that there should be more stuff. So that's a show in itself. So I'll talk to you after this show. I'll touch base with you, and we'll schedule an interview, just you and I, one-on-one, and we'll be able to dive into that a little bit deeper, because I want to know what you did. I know that you've been around for a long time. For those who are listening who don't know Cal has been around for a long time. I urge you all to look him up. You easily Google Cal. What's your website?
Well, I have a Facebook page, just Cal Corp. It's public. There's no restrictions. And I have on Amazon the expose of the Meyer case, and for better or for worse, the best-selling Roswell expose out there, Roswell UFO crash, what they don't want you to know.
Yeah, and again, I'm interested in that. Stanton knew, even though he was someone I considered a dear friend and a friend for 20 plus years, he knows that I didn't believe every conclusion that he came up with. But that's why I love these types of conversations, is you can have the conversation and, give each other a man hug at the end of the day and go, okay, man, I'll see you tomorrow. And that's how Stanton was. That's what's fun about it. So we'll definitely have to get you back on Mogul. The second part, if I remember correctly, of the original question you had of why isn't there more of a paper trail, right? Did I understand that? Like, why isn't there more of a...
Yeah, for example, real quickly to flesh it out very quickly so it can go back to you at your show, is when I was in Prague and dealing with people who fought the Cold War, were on the front lines, dealt with everybody from Hitler to Stalin, all that stuff, Israel, Mossad, etc. What shocked me, other than they were proud of Hynek, the Czechs, he's their most famous UFO guy over there, it was the absence of evidence. Mossad doesn't care about UFOs, and that really shocked me, because I thought there'd be a whole bunch of files spying on Americans for whatever. No, there was more files from Russia spying on the activity of Americans. And so, because I respect Mossad and I understand they are the top dog, it makes me wonder as a human being that if Mossad doesn't care about aliens visiting the U.S., why wouldn't they, if there was any smoking gun anywhere hidden, stashed away, rumored, in possession, physical, whatever? If any of this was true, for what most people believe now, and it's the majority of the population, why does Mossad, they're either the most incompetent agency on the planet, or maybe that's not the answer. Yeah. And I have to suspect it's the latter, even though it's disappointing. But I distinguish between the issue of being visited versus life existing out there. It must exist somewhere else, or we are the exception to the laws of the universe, and that's not possible. Yeah, well, that's a different conversation in itself. What I would say about Mossad, and we'll dig into this when I get you back on, but here's what I would say is that in this is just my 2 cents. When you deal with the U.S. government, in my opinion, you're dealing with one of the highest classified topics, and that is provable. I mean, you look at the National Security Agency documents, you can argue, sources and methods, and again, you and I will have that conversation, I'm sure. But when you look at the amount of top secret information that surrounds UFOs, we're dealing with a highly classified topic. And so one thing that we'll save this for our conversation, is to dig in on whether or not that particular person would have access to again, using the comparison, a highly classified or highly sensitive research
area of study within Mossad. Now, it is possible that they didn't, but broaden beyond Mossad. And you look at other world governments that have taken this interest, taken an interest in it. You look at other world governments that are scratching their head, and you look at other world militaries that go, "We have no idea what the hell these things are." They're doing, videos of their own and scratching their head. Now, I'm playing a little bit of devil's advocate because I feel in some cases we can put some of those cases to bed. But for the sake of this conversation, you do have a lot of world governments. I mean, I wouldn't argue, nor would I bet on a side that said the U.S. is the only one with this issue. There is a well-defined history throughout many, not all, but many world governments and militaries that are just as perplexed and confused and frustrated as the United States was in the 1940s. And so, and even today. So I think that there's definitely a case to be put up that if Mossad didn't, maybe they are missing the boat. That's quite possible. There's many areas that the U.S. intelligence community is missing the boat on away from UFOs, and that in itself is a different show. But anyway, Cal, I'll definitely touch base with you. I think it would be a great conversation, and we can dig in a lot more, and do a full show with you.
Well, I appreciate the honor. I'd also like to have you on my show just so you could share your experience. Real quickly, I remember telling people in Prague when I was starting the terrorism thing years ago after 9/11 that, this man, this young boy, you were young back then, is very interesting, and it's going to be interesting to see how his opinion changes because it's going to change based on the data. And I'm just saying, having followed you off and on over the years in 27 countries, I just think you're golden, and just keep up the damn good work, John.
I really appreciate that, Cal. Thank you. We'll definitely talk soon.
Okay, take care.
Thank you. All right, so appreciate that call, Cal. I know that was a lot of information, not expected, but at least, get a little bit of Cal Korff in here, and we'll bring him back. It should be an interesting conversation. So back to what I want to kind of go with the slide presentation. Feel free to call in. I might put you on hold and drop you in the queue there for a minute, but feel free to give a call if you'd like, or continue texting. I know that there's some messages in here. And so let me go ahead and deal with one response of a FOIA request, because I did tease this out and I want to make sure it's not too long before I get to this. And this happened in just the last 24 hours. Nothing internationally headline breaking, but this is a AATIP related or UFO study, the AATIP UFO study related request. Now, this actually goes back all the way to March of 2018. And the reason why it says September 21 is one of the cases actually got transferred over. And then so they gave it a new case number and they gave it a new date of receipt. It's just more of a legal thing. But when I started chasing documents within the U.S. Navy, it actually goes back to something that Luis Elizondo said in an interview. If memory serves me well, I believe it was with George Knapp. And in his interview, he had stated, and I'm paraphrasing, based on the question of where did you get your information, he was saying that they were getting information from X, from Y, from Z, and the Department of the Navy. And so I had filed quite a few requests based on that particular line right there. But this particular one is in reference to the U.S. Navy. And so I have waited. It got bounced around, as I mentioned, and it finally got a response. Today is the 17th. It's dated the 15th. It arrived on the 16th, and which was yesterday as of the date of this recording. What I had requested, and you can see up here, I had requested all photographs, videos, reports, letters, memos, etc. that were sent by your agency, meaning the Department of the Navy, to the Office for the Secretary of Defense, the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. That is the office where Mr. Elizondo ran AATIP. That is undisputed. That's where it was. Or to the OUSDI, so I stipulated OUSDI or the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is the DIA, in regards to the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or AATIP. The Navy searched Chief of Naval Operations for Information Warfare and the Office of Naval Intelligence. ONI is going to be important here in a minute. But those two agencies and offices that would actually communicate with OUSDI, which is where Elizondo worked, they searched, and from the point that they processed to now, they found absolutely nothing. Now, are they going to change that statement in the future? Are they lying? Did they not find something? Yeah, quite possibly. But I found it really weird now that the U.S. Navy is saying we had no communication with Elizondo's office in regards to AATIP or anything sharing videos, photographs, so on and so forth. So the question is, what is this cliffhanger now? And I'm, again, not saying that this is golden, but it's now becoming yet again a he said, she said story. Which side is telling the truth? And we really don't know. And I hope more information comes out about the nitty-gritty details, because this is exactly why those nitty-gritty details matter. Some people, again, chastised for looking into minutia and who cares, look at the big picture. It's not about the big picture anymore. It's about the minutia, and these little details will bring out cases like the Nimitz. If they shared a video that happened in 2014, nobody's ever seen it before, that's where these things are golden. And yes, the FOIA works, and yes, you can access stuff like this given the proper, given the proper fight to do it. Sometimes you run into dead ends all the time, but that's where these little nitty-gritty details happen. So what does that mean? Again, it really, I'm just throwing it out there for you guys, but this completely contradicts the story that we were told and contradicts what Mr. Elizondo was saying was going on and where they were getting their reports from. So for what it's worth. Okay, just a this is where I was originally going to open the lines, but I had them open a little bit more. Let me go ahead and hit the phones. Hi there, you're on the air. Who's this?
So what does that mean? Hello, John?
Yes.
Hi, this is Steve Padilla from Las Vegas.
Hey, Steve Padilla, how are you? Long-time listener. It's good to hear your voice again.
Thank you. I have a few questions, but before I do, I just want to say congratulations on your anniversary, and I didn't know a researcher had such moves. I just want to ask.
Hello. Oh, Steven, if you can are you still there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right. I don't know what happened there, but I really appreciate that. For those who don't know what he's talking about, my 8th wedding anniversary was this last Monday. So thank you, Stephen. I do appreciate that.
You're welcome. Yes, like you said, I follow the UFO news daily, and I also post the news on the Facebooks. And one of the topics that really grabbed me this week was the Pentagon refusing to release the videos due to national security.
Yes.
And that just kind of stuck with me. And I keep thinking, and I'm reading all these articles, and I'm looking at the whole picture of 2020 ufology and 2019. And I see this sense that maybe we got the Pentagon with the back against the wall. I seem to see that there's a lot of pressure on them. I've never seen this situation with, so much talk with the releasing of the videos, that maybe we just might be pushing them a little hard. Do you think so?
Well, I think the pressure is definitely on. Ironically, yeah, that was actually one of the things that I'm putting on screen now, a different question that came in from a Captain Shipwreck via YouTube, and my thoughts on the Vice News story about the Navy saying that the videos are secret and top secret. For those who aren't aware of this story, Stephen, bear with me. I just want to tell it very quickly. So people know what we're talking about. I'm also putting on the screen the man who deserves the thanks for this one. This was a Freedom of Information Act request by Christian Lambright. Sadly, Christian's name didn't appear in many of the stories that talked about this, and he deserves the credit, where he was going after information on the Nimitz encounter. And to summarize the story, he went to the Office of Naval Intelligence and discovered that there are top secret briefing slides, so like a PowerPoint presentation, that were considered top secret and they were not going to release them. And then that there were also, let me see here, trying to make sure. We have discovered certain briefing slides that are classified top secret. A review of these materials indicate that they are currently inappropriately marked and classified top secret under Executive Order 13526. They also discovered that they had video, which may or may not be the same video that we know as FLIR 1, which they said is classified secret. I would put up a small argument that it's not the same because I have a written statement from the Navy saying the FLIR 1 is considered unclassified. So I would say that this is potentially, and this is a good thing, a new video, a different video that they are withholding. So Stephen, back to your question. Yeah, we're putting a lot of pressure on the Department of the Navy simply because the Department of the Navy has been the most outspoken about UAPs, the most outspoken about, that this is an unknown phenomena. And I think, in my opinion, this is just an opinion, they went too far. They may have said too much. And the reason I say that now is if you want to ask the Navy about anything about UFOs and how it pertains to the Navy, you get forwarded to the Office of the Secretary of Defense in the Pentagon for a reply. If you ask the Defense Intelligence Agency anything about UAPs or AATIP or OSAP, you get forwarded to that same person. If you ask the Air Force anything about UAPs, UFOs, or AATIP or OSAP or anything, you get forwarded to that same one spokesperson. I don't have a very good reason for that on an official level. Just my guess is potentially these agencies went too far, namely the Navy. And they said, yes, we consider these unidentified. We have no idea what they are. An international explosion of headlines came out. I have a slide here that I'm showing that shows just on this story that Christian Lambright with his FOIA request that garnered. This is huge. This is a big story on a worldwide level. And I think the Navy knows that. And I think that that's why now they're not talking. And they're consolidating all of that into one office in the Pentagon. And that's incredibly problematic because that one person is getting flooded by people like me and other investigative journalists out there that are working for papers that want answers. It all goes to one person. And I think that that's problematic. So I don't know what's going to happen. I'm frustrated because it's like we made good progress mid to late 2019. And then all of a sudden it was like, in my opinion, they went too far and now they're starting to cover it up. And you've got consolidation from a spokesperson level. And then the Freedom of Information Act requests, I'm not saying they're true or not. I'm just saying now those are starting to surface a little bit saying, oh yeah, we got nothing. So Mr. Elizondo's on the record saying it's a UFO program. Pentagon changes their statement and said, no, it wasn't. He goes on the record and said the Navy is one of the sources where we got this information. The Navy said, nope, we never talked to him. So it's like, what do you believe? And that's a very tough answer tough question to answer.
And one more. Regarding one of your documents you posted on the Black Vault regarding the FOI request.
Yes.
And where they stated on the document you should get your own posse band going and making a joke of it. It blew me away, John. I didn't expect them to do.
Whoa. Sorry, I think you were pushing a button. You didn't expect what there, Stephen?
That they would write that on the document regarding joking about it.
Yeah. I was surprised at that as well. That was a find through Jason Leopold. And for those watching, there's a video on this very channel. If you could help me out, make sure you press like down below and also subscribe and turn those notifications on. But I just posted a video a couple days ago about how the Navy celebrated that I lost a Freedom of Information Act request. And then on top of that, I showed a document that was found a few years ago where they were making fun of me and two other requesters saying we should, create a FOIA posse band. And, it's just kind of a lack of respect for what they're doing for the citizens who have a right to do what we're doing. So anyway, thanks for acknowledging that, Stephen. I really appreciate it.
And if I may suggest a guest, I would love would be Leslie Keene. I think she would be.
Yeah. I don't know what's going on there with the beeps there, but Stephen, yes, you're absolutely right. Leslie Keene would be Great guest. She's always welcome. I did reach out to her for an interview. Gosh, it's probably been about a year and a half now. Didn't hear back. I know she's pretty busy, so I will reach out to her again. Sorry, Stephen, I didn't want to cut you off, but I think maybe the buttons were being pressed on your phone. And if that happens with the next caller, I'll know that it's me. But I appreciate that, Stephen, and thank you very much for your support and for your phone call. I know you've been a long-time listener, so I definitely appreciate that. So one of the big things I want to point out, too, just as an informational point, is the biggest part of the headline, going back to Christian Lambright's FOIA request, saying that if they released that information, it would cause grave damage to the national security of the United States. What's really interesting about national security information is that is actually how they define top secret information. Anything top secret is considered something that will cause grave damage to the national security of the United States. So I always like this extra information just in case you guys actually care, because you may see a lot of references to what's called Executive Order 13526, which talks about national security information handling and stuff like that. And in one section, they define top secret, secret, and confidential. Not many people know, like, this is where it is defined. What says that you can give something top secret status or secret classification or whatever. And they define it like this: top secret information is anything that will be expected to cause exceptionally grave damage to the national security. So those are the headlines that we're seeing. So that becomes actually boilerplate language, on Freedom of Information Act requests whenever they deny top secret information. Generally, it will kind of expand on that and say, if we were to release this to you, it would cause grave damage to the national security of the United States. Secret information will cause serious damage. Now, what in the world is the difference between serious damage and grave damage? That really isn't defined, but I kind of find that humorous. One is grave, one is serious. And then confidential information, if released to the public, will just cause damage. Not grave, not serious, but damage. So for me, it's a little bit silly on the way that they break it down, but those are the three. If it's on Final Jeopardy tonight, I'll expect half of your winnings. But Executive Order 13526, which overrode 12958 for those taking notes, is what to watch for when it comes to classified information. Let me see what else we got here. I know I've got one more question. Regarding the Tic Tac encounter, this is from another Patreon supporter, Alien Hero. So Alien Hero, if you're in the room, thank you so much for your support of the Black Vault and submitting your question. Regarding the Tic Tac encounter, David Fravor said about or within 60 seconds after his encounter with the Tic Tac, the controller on Princeton communicated to him that the Tic Tac reappeared about 60 miles away at the cap point they were to meet at. How do you think the object would have known the cap point? So let me start with that first, and it's actually going to go into your second question. And do you think the fact it showed up at their future destination point better supports a human or extraterrestrial intelligence? This is a great question. For those who don't know, during the Nimitz encounter, yes, the object kind of, went towards what they call the cap point. This was the point where essentially the pilots were going to meet at in their, general vicinity, in their operating area. That to me seems very intriguing, but blown, in my opinion, a bit out of proportion. I think let's just operate off the assumption for a moment it's alien. Number one, I don't think they care to play cat and mouse games, with an F-18 or an F-14 or an F-15. I just don't think that they care. I really don't. If they can get from there to here, our B-2 stealth bombers are irrelevant to them, right? I mean, I love the anthill analogy. Ants are one of the most intelligent species on the face of the earth. I'm one of the very few people, I think, that I know that I love ants. My wife wants to kill me. I made her watch a documentary one time. They make incredibly advanced structures. Termites do the same thing. We don't go and marvel over that. You have to be a geek like me to go out there and go, wow, look at this, but for them it's advanced. we are closer in the intelligence gap to an ant than we would be a alien that's traversing the stars. And so they're coming here. They're not going to care about our nukes. They're not going to care about our F-18s. They're not going to care about our Navy. We are that anthill in the middle of the desert that they just don't care about. Not to sound somber about the whole thing, I just don't see it. In my opinion, the fact that it showed up at the cap point actually does make me lean, though I can't name it for you, but lean towards a human technology, a military-backed piece of technology that is potentially being tested out there in 2004 without everyone being read in. I think it explains the Air Force coming in, confiscating tapes. If again, you're to believe that testimony, which I have no reason not to. And so if this was let's switch gears. Operate off the assumption it is an advanced piece of technology that is being tested out there, everything all of a sudden makes sense. It knew where the cap point was, so it had intelligence on the military side of it. Would an alien care? Probably not. On top of that, the Air Force coming in and confiscating the material. Why the Air Force? With Air Force uniforms, as I recall from that testimony, coming in and grabbing the tapes and taking them off. And it also makes sense that information would be classified top secret because it is classified technology. That is one thing about the video that has always confused me, going back to what we just talked about the top secret video. If the FLIR 1 is considered unclassified, number one, the Navy could have lied to me. That's possible. But they said it was always unclassified in its original form and its present state. And so that means it was never captured on camera and it was classified top secret for 10 years and then they declassified. None of that is the case. It was unclassified since the moment they captured it, according to the U.S. Navy. Office of Naval Intelligence says they have a video related to this and it's classified top secret. Now, the assumption is that's the FLIR 1. That's the longer FLIR 1 video. I just would put up the argument, likely it's not, which still makes it interesting. But on top of that, there is a reason why then they would classify it, because maybe it's not what they captured on camera. Maybe it's the camera itself. Maybe it's that capability. Maybe it's the resolution. You look at the National Reconnaissance Office files. I've dug up classified material, now declassified, on cameras that they had in space operating for decades, and no one ever knew. And in fact, a shameless plug, I'm coming out with my next book in April, which is not a UFO book. It is something that's going to be dealing with a lot of other government secrets and a lot of other conspiracies, so to speak. And I go into that. And so that in itself could be the reason why it's top secret, not because it captured an object or whatever it may have captured, but it was the means and the ways that it was captured, which makes it classified. So there's still a lot of unanswered questions here that I think, well, as we know, the media does best. It definitely gets blown out of proportion. So we'll see how all of that, comes around when hopefully things are one day declassified, but who knows on that one. Let me go ahead and get this, some text messages and some of these other ones. The phone lines are still open. If you're having a problem with the phone line too, feel free to put it in the chat line. The way the queuing system works, sometimes if it malfunctions, I just have to log off and log back on. So let me go ahead and, I haven't read these, so I'm just kind of going by what's texted in here. Are you affiliated with USG, the United States government, directly or indirectly? Can we have a background on you? I've seen your site a few times, but I'm not sure I remember seeing a bio. Echo Voice. So I'm guessing that might be your handle, Echo Voice. So thank you for the question. So I have gone into my background. I am, number one, not affiliated with the U.S. government at all. What I do in a nutshell is I go after Freedom of Information Act documents. My special focus is stuff that I get directly from the government itself, legally, not through leaks, not from a guy who, tracks me down in a dark garage on a rainy night and hands me an envelope full of stuff. I literally go after documents from a legal way. everything you see on the blackvault.com was obtained through the Freedom of Information Act. I do have sections where it's not. But again, the document archive is 100%. And so, yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell. Not government affiliated. Obviously, I work with the government through the Freedom of Information Act, which I say that loosely. It's not working with them, but that's my connection to them. But other than that, it's via email and mail mostly. I don't get a paycheck from Uncle Sam. I'm not CIA, contrary to some of the conspiracy theories out there. I am just a citizen. I started when I was 15 years old. I'm now a hell of a lot older, and really started as a teenager looking into government secrets. I've had a lot of fun with it. Built the blackvault.com, which is what you see. So good to have your question. I love that because you don't know my background. So I always appreciate those types of questions so assumptions aren't made. So thank you for that. Another one. Hey, John, love your work. My question is, do you think shows like Ancient Aliens and Unsealed Alien Files help or hurt real disclosure? Thanks, Brian. Brian, thank you for that. Unsealed Alien Files, well, I was on that show, so I'd like to think that it helped at least a little bit, although I will say this about it, it did get pretty out there. There were some episodes you don't see me in. That was by design. That was my choosing, simply because a lot of those things were a little bit too far out for me. Ancient Aliens is very far out there for me. I have had 2 requests to appear on the program. I've turned them both down respectfully. I do know some of the producers that are on that show, and obviously a lot of people that are on camera I know and are personal friends of mine. So I don't want this to come off as insulting, but no, I think in the grander scheme, a lot of those shows do hurt. And I say that as a television producer, somebody who's done quite a few UFO files for the History Channel, UFO related programs, even a lot of non-UFO programs. But I think as a whole for this conversation, it hurts. I do. And the reason is because producers and writers and directors, and you have the power of editing and you have the power to twist a little bit. Now, not to speak bad against History Channel owned by A&E Networks, but sadly, there's not a whole lot of history anymore in some of this. We're getting more into drama and sensationalized history. And, it's very hard it's really hard to take that seriously as somebody who loves this topic and wants the public to be made aware of what's really going on. I think that hurts. And some of these topics definitely hurt. Some of these shows, I should say, definitely hurt because the topics are not handled the way that they should. So going back to producers, producers have this incredible power and they can essentially fill in the gaps, fill in the holes a little bit. You see this with reality type programming. I cringe every time that there's a new UFO investigation show where 3 people, 4 people, the skeptic, the believer, the adventurer, it's a cookie cutter model that we see over and over and over. I cringe because UFO research is not that exciting. And I think that that's what a lot of people miss is with television, you have like a schedule. You got to get things done. And UFO research usually does not operate that way. And so as a producer, you got to kind of fill in the gaps. Full disclosure, I was a producer and writer on season 3 of UFO Hunters with Bill Burns. And I was really proud of my episodes. We did the Dulce base episode. That was mine. I created that one to go out and visit Dulce, New Mexico, and we went up top to Archuleta Mesa, so I did that one. Another one where we talked about military kind of close encounters with aircraft. So, I'm proud of the shows and episodes that I had done, but I think again on a broader scale, it hurts because the public, they start to see that and go, well, I saw it on Ancient Aliens. It has to be true. This has to be the reality of what's going on. And that isn't always the case. So sadly, I love television and I love making it, but I think you got to really be careful with what you're watching. All right. So I got a UFO submission here. So for that one who sent it in, looks like a pretty long one. So I appreciate that. So I'm not going to read this on the air, but what you can go ahead and do is I do have a reporting form and I'll get this published for you. Just go to the blackvault.com, click on the case file section, and then under UFOs, there's a report form. Feel free to fill that out with the detail that you sent me here, and I really appreciate that. For the chat room, I think I'm Collective Dog. John is a consulting producer on a bunch of UFO shows. Yes. I consult a lot too. It depends. For those who want me to back up that statement, if you go to IMDb and search my name, you'll be able to come up with all my various credits, just so you know I'm not blowing smoke on you. I've done quite a few different shows for History, National Geographic Channel, Discovery Channel, so on and so forth. It's hard for me to watch that chat. I'm doing my best for questions, so make sure you text them in. Oh, I forgot. It's not on the air. It's not on. I'm going to go ahead and put this slide back. But that way you have the call-in number and text-in number. I'll fix that by the next show. I forgot that the numbers weren't on there. Sorry about that. So feel free to call in or text in your questions. I've got some others that were emailed here we'll deal with. And, if we're out of questions, I'll go ahead and close the stream. But hopefully this kind of gave you guys something to think about. Here's one. This was one of my favorites, actually. This was a Twitter account. I want to know, his name is John, or at least it's in the Twitter handle. Where do you get the info on what to ask for? I've always wondered. And I love this question because I love the Freedom of Information Act and all those who want to use it. This was in a response to a post that I did today that was about a contract that Eric Davis was a part of. Eric Davis being the one that authored some of the defense reports that were connected to OSAP. That's that, again, rumored UFO study. I had posted years ago a study he did back in 2004 on teleportation physics, so teleporting, making one thing go from here to there, but also advanced propulsion, both in 2004. And so one of the things that plays into this question is what I did was I started then. There it is. There's the call-in number for those watching live. Now it's back on the screen. So what I did was I looked at those reports, and there's a contract number in there. And where I want to kind of start with is those are the types of things that I go for, the little obscure references. Consider it like a tree. And that obscure reference is a branch of the tree. That report is the trunk. Then you got a little branch of a contract number. Then you go after that contract number, which is what I posted today, the contract that those two reports came out of. I never expected that it was actually going to be an 18 or $18.5 million contract that yielded a ton of reports. I don't know how many, but it seems like it's fairly voluminous on how many reports were submitted. But that's what's cool, because that just became another branch of the tree. And so you start with one thing, and a lot of FOIA requesters, from what I've seen through FOIA logs and stuff like that, is you get kind of the surface water. And the surface water stuff is what I just called the tree trunk. They're happy with the report. That's it. They walk away. For me, I want to go after, what else was made under that contract? Those two reports I thought were the contract. I was wrong. And so that's what's cool about you just keep digging and you keep looking for those obscure references. I'll give you another example. I haven't talked about this, but this one's kind of interesting. This was a Freedom of Information Act appeal that I just won with the Department of Defense. And I had requested a search for Mr. Luis Elizondo's emails because one request yielded his actual address. So I did a Freedom of Information Act request saying I want all emails that contain this word. I did quite a few of those, but the one I'm going to bring up is called Community of Interest. Now, Community of Interest, for you TTSA fans out there, or to the Stars Academy fans, you know Community of Interest as the section of their website, which they've now renamed The Vault. I don't know why. That's what they did. I'm flattered. But they renamed it to The Vault. But their Community of Interest was revealed to have ties back, well, at least the phrasing anyway, to Mr. Luis Elizondo in his time in the Pentagon. And he was trying to create a database that they were going to use internally to keep track of unmanned aerial systems, or unmanned aircraft systems, I should say, and unmanned, essentially drones and UAVs, and keep track of those that were essentially a threat, that were potentially going to create harm to military installations. He said there was no central repository. And I'm paraphrasing here. that community of interest away from UFOs, and I've said this before, that's a really important topic in my view. Goes back to the Colorado drone things that we were talking about earlier. And so I requested a search through his emails for everything about the community of interest, and it came up with no records. Why that's interesting is I had already a Freedom of Information Act request with an email that said community of interest. I knew that there were responsive records. I appealed it and it was granted. I haven't posted this yet. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but since we're all sharing stories, I just in the last week got the determination that not only the appeal was granted, so they had to search again. Now they're saying, oh, sorry, that was the only email that he had. So I don't know why I didn't get it in the first place, because they will duplicate documents. They don't cross-reference and go, well, John already got this. They don't do that. So are they lying? Are they covering that up? I'm not really sure. That's on a long list of questions I want to ask Mr. Elizondo the next time. Hopefully we chat again, of not challenging it, but rather actually asking for his help. If he knows that there were more emails that were sent about this community of interest, I can appeal based on his testimony. Will he work with me? I don't know. I hope so. But I'm looking to get that information out. I think it's a very admirable cause. It was not supposed to be highly classified, or the email would have been classified, and it was not. So I'm going after that. I know I got long-winded there, John, but that's what you have to do with the Freedom of Information Act, is look and dig and find those obscure references. Again, surface water is usually good for a lot of people. I want the immense amount of deep sea water that's underneath it. And generally there is. Contracts, emails, keywords, keyword searches. You can come up with a ton of stuff. And that's what I go for. And so that's kind of my aim with the Freedom of Information Act. And you can get clever. I mean, you can really try and figure out a specific wording on a FOIA request to go for records that no one else thought of before. And you start getting really interesting results. I'll be publishing more in the future, but here's one I'll throw out there that some of you may get a kick out of. Do a Freedom of Information Act request for somebody's email, search of somebody's email, and the phrasing you ask them to search for is off the record, and see what comes up. And so I'll have more on that in the next coming weeks and months, but I've got some fun ones on that. I have stacks, like, I know you guys can't see it, but I've got mounds of boxes and papers in this office that have yet to go online. And so there's all sorts of stuff. Anyway, John, not to be long-winded, which is generally my middle name, but hopefully that gave you some kind of food for thought. Here's another one. Horned One on YouTube wrote in, of all of your 10,000 requests, how many of those were requests for info pertaining to previous requests? The context of this was, if you do look at this channel, if you haven't seen it, I did discover that the Navy internally cheered. I talked about that with Stephen Padilla. So I have a whole video on that. I highly recommend you watch it. It's pretty interesting to see how they, again, internally were jubilant that I lost a Freedom of Information Act appeal. He asked how many of my 10,000 requests, I've done 10,000 in about 23 years, over 23 now, how many were doing that. And so I looked as promised, and actually not many. I usually only do that, request information on a FOIA request when I think it'll yield something interesting. For those Freedom of Information Act people that are watching, what I mean by this, if you haven't seen the other video, is when you create a Freedom of Information Act request, it's considered a case. When you create an appeal, it gets a different case number, and that is considered a case. Internally, documents are generated, notes, emails, all sorts of stuff. When a case closes out, you can then file a Freedom of Information Act for all records pertaining to those case numbers. That's how I discovered the internal celebration that I lost my Freedom of Information Act appeal, which, sure, may have been harmless, and I'm sure it was, but the idea was, why are you cheering when you're supposed to be on the side of transparency? And so joke or not, innocent or not, that's potentially problematic. So that's the context of that question, and it was also a great question. Here's another one. Great research, John Greenewald. I appreciate that, Collective Dog. Thank you. PB, just because I saw this, and again, guys, it's hard for me to watch that chat room. Any FOIA regarding plasma beam hologram technology? Wow. I don't think so. I would recommend using my search engine. A lot of times I'll find things that I forgot I had. Off the top of my head, though, that does not sound familiar. So sorry about that. Naughty Monkey, thanks for joining. I know you got to go, you said, but I appreciate you tuning in, and of course everyone else in the chat room. Julian Moreno, just curious, John, what is your earliest recollection? This was actually posted in the chat room prior to going live. What is your earliest recollection of a UFO story? For me, it was the famous UFO landing in North Bergen, New Jersey in the 1970s. Well, Julian, I invite you to submit your story as well to the Black Vault. I'll get that published for you. And you know, you never know. Somebody may have seen that too and search online and come across your case. I'm going to kind of twist your question to at least address something that is very commonly asked, especially when I do lectures and stuff. Have I ever had a UFO sighting? Because you were talking about what's my earliest recollection of a UFO story. I assume you mean like if I saw one, how young was I? Assuming that I had seen one. I actually have not. I've never really seen anything that I really go, oh my God, that is a UFO. I'm also admittedly a skeptic, and yes, things catch my eye, and yes, I'll take a double take, and admittedly, I'll go, it's got to be a plane, it's got to be a meteor, I'm getting old, maybe my eyes are going, so, I'll think of an excuse and I'll let it go, so I'm not the best one to really be on the list of somebody who's going to have a UFO story, so not to be boring with that answer, but I've never seen one. So hopefully one day I will, and it'll be irrefutable, and we'll, hopefully be able to take a picture or a video of it, and I'll post it online, and my whole life will change. But other than that, not yet. So let me check the chat room real quick. If no more calls, by the way, if you want to get your call in, do it now. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. John, what TV show were you on in the 1990s? So Raptor Man, I assume it was a couple. I'm going to assume I started this all in 1996. So I'm going to guess you're referring to the biggest one, which was Confirmation. And that was a 2-hour special on NBC that was based on Whitley Strieber's book. And Whitley had given me a call after I was on Art Bell and said, I want to profile your story on this new TV show for NBC. Now, the only big publicity the Black Vault had gotten in 98, excuse me. And so I was on Art Bell in 98. I had started in 96. And so I was like, yeah, I mean, the biggest publicity I gotten, which was huge already, was Art Bell. But I thought, wow, NBC, it was a primetime special. Yeah, okay. And they sent a crew out to my house. We shot at my high school. I was a sophomore in high school. So my sophomore when I started, but my life was very secret. I still am, even though I do a kind of a public life. Yeah, my friends, other than my immediate family, most of my friends, unless they saw it on TV or if I, have a few beers and start yapping about it, I generally don't talk about it at all. And so it was a huge shock when on my junior year, NBC showed up and, they're shooting this television series, me walking around campus and, just kind of profiling that I was a teenager. And so the rest was history. It aired in the beginning of 1999. And that really, I think, put the Black Vault on the map simply because it was huge. I mean, it was a huge show for NBC. Got huge ratings. And obviously based on Whitley Strieber's book. So when Whitley had called and said, hey, I want to profile you, I did not miss that opportunity. And kind of the rest was history. Appeared quite a few times at Art Bell after that, and then various news channels and stuff like that in kind of the marketing side of that show. So my guess is, though, in the 90s, you're probably talking about that. Yeah, Confirmation, Renee, you're right. That Confirmation, the hard evidence of aliens among us. Did Grant fall off the planet? Haven't heard from him in a while. You know what? I haven't heard from Grant either, but I know he's been, well, I haven't seen anything, but I know he's been working quite a bit. He was doing the Stanton Friedman files. I had him on this show, so if you missed that interview, he goes into some of the Stanton Friedman files. So, all right, let me check text one more time. I think that's it, though. I really do appreciate all you guys showing up. If there was any problems whatsoever from a technical angle, hopefully you'll email me. Every contact form on the Black Vault comes to me. This was a bit of a test. I didn't advertise it my normal way on my mailing list and stuff like that. I just did social media on the off chance that I had the same technical issue or something went awry like yesterday. I didn't want to, blast it out and have everybody come in and then, fail miserably. So that said, though, those that did join me, thank you so much for all your questions, for your emails, Twitter questions and comments. I wasn't able to check that live. I don't know if there's anything on there, but hopefully you'll join me next time. I hope you guys learned something. I really do appreciate that time that you spent logging in. Make sure before you leave, please click that like button, subscribe to the channel, and of course, turn the notifications on. Turning the notifications on will alert you to when I've got new videos, and obviously going live, you'll be able to hop in and hopefully join me on the air in the future. So thank you guys all again so much. This is John Greenewald Jr. signing off. We'll see you next time.